Alright, hello and welcome to another tutorial for Unreal Engine. This time we're going to talk about wind. And this is basically an add-on to an amazing tutorial that's made by my friend Charlie. He's the guy that's working on Prismatica. I do recommend watching that tutorial first on how to actually add and implement a wind system, a global wind system that basically makes your trees sway around, make your grass react to it. It's amazing. I'm just going to put a link down in the description with the very first link, and it's also up here in the cards thingy. You can check out the tutorial. After you've done that, you might be wondering, okay, so how to do audio for this? It's just a very quick tip, a very quick tutorial that I just figured I would share with you. A very simple node that exists in Unreal that lets you do this, but you can basically procedurally have wind sounds that come in and go out depending on your wind intensity. So I'm just going to show you a clip of how that works in action, and then we're going to get to the tutorial. So as I mentioned before, it's good to check the tutorial on the global wind. If you have, great. You should already have yourself a material collection that has the wind intensity. But if you just here for the wind sound, then you need to make yourself a variable that is globally available. And the best way to do that would be a material collection. So just right click, go to materials, and then make a material parameter collection. I have one called weather system, and if I open it, right here I have a parameter name called wind intensity, and it's set to 1. Now for yourself, you need to have different levels of intensity. For me, it's between 1 to 5. So level 1 would be just a calm day, and 5 would be like really super windy. Now there are two parts to the system. One of them is a sound cue that handles all of the audio fading in and going out, and the second part is a system that would change this wind intensity on the fly. So move it up, move it down, and I'm going to show you both of them. So the first one is the wind cue, which is the meat of this tutorial really. So if you just go to your sounds folder, and then you just need to make an audio cue. So sound cue. And inside this, you need to use this node, this lovely node called crossfade by parameter. So if you just put that there, what this does is very simple. It basically gets a parameter up here in the name, and then depending on what this parameter is, it's just, by the way, a float. It'll start to fade in and fade out the audio depending on the parameter. So for example, imagine you have 5 different sounds for 5 different intensities of wind. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would be the wind intensities. You can set these to like to fade in at 0 and then fade out at 1.2-ish. It's a good idea to put a different number between start and end so that you give it some time to fade instead of just chopping in and chopping out. And yeah, we're basically going to need 5 of this. And I've already made one here. It's just the same thing. I only have different wind intensities connected to this. By the way, all these wind intensity sounds, I'm just going to share it with you in the description if you want to download it, if you want to. They're not great, but they work for at least placeholder, so you can start making this. So if you check the second link in the description, there's going to be a download link to all of these WAV files. Anyway, we need to connect these and make sure that each one of them also have looping checked. Now, in the crossfade, as I mentioned, I have 1 to 5, and the parameter name, make sure to change this to something that you can remember. For me, it's wind intensity. And yeah, the first one, which is basically calm day, is 0.9. Is where it would start to fade out, and then 1.2 is where it will fully fade out. The second one, it starts to fade in at 1. So as you can see, there's a bit of an overlap between those two, which there needs to be because you never want it to be fully quiet. And then it stops fading in basically at 1.3, fades out at 2, 2.3, and I'm just going to show you the rest of the values if you want to just set them up like mine. Here it is if you want to pause the video and take a screenshot. That's it. I even have these two pretty much overlap with each other, because when the wind is really intense, you might be hearing two different waves of wind coming from different sides. And that is it. If you just play the cue, it's going to play the very first one, because the intensity by default is just 0. Now we need to be controlling this value. So I did this in my game mode. You can do this in your player character, player controller, it doesn't matter. I did this in my game mode. I basically added the an audio asset, and I set it to wind cue. You need this to be in a blueprint because you need to be able to reference it. Or you can put it somewhere in your level, and then you can use a blueprint to and a variable to then eyedrop it and select it. This is the second part of it, which will change the intensity of wind randomly for me. So the very first thing it's doing is that I have a minimum intensity and maximum intensity. So because my game has it's a JRPG, so like at the end of the day when you go to sleep, you progress to the next day. So each day has its own forecast, and I want each day to have different wind intensities. So one day can be a stormy day, one day can be a calm day. So minimum intensity and maximum intensity, just two integers that I have, and then I go ahead and set that parameter from the weather system called wind intensity to the very first one. So we always start with the minimum, and then we go through a delay of 10 to 20 seconds. This can again be parameterized. That's the word. I think that's the word. So you can have different basically you can tell your game how quickly to change the wind state. I realized 10 to 20 is something that feels kind of natural but also doesn't feel boring, and you know, you can really showcase that you have, hey, I have variable wind in my game. After that delay, I get the value of it. I set it to a variable called start intensity. I have another one called random intensity and one called final intensity. So we set this to start intensity, and then this random intensity is I basically get my final intensity, which is what comes out of this. I add one and take one from it, use that as a min max, and then I clamp it to be basically to not go higher than my maximum intensity that I want it to be, and then I feed that onto the random intensity. Why does it need to be a variable? Is because this is a random float. So if I want to use that as a lerp, every time the lerp runs, it's going to give me a random value. And I actually didn't realize this, and I was having so much trouble with it. It was so annoying. Anyway, after this, you need to have a timeline. This timeline basically smooths the change between the wind intensities. It's just a timeline from 0 to 1. It takes 5 seconds, and then we use this timeline as a lerp, as an alpha for a lerp, and we go between the start intensity and the random intensity that we've just created over there. And then that would be our final intensity, which then we set it to be the parameter value for our wind. So this is all going to do the whole wind system that you had working in your game. But then this part is we just grab the wind audio cue. We use this node called set float parameter, and then you put in the name of wind intensity, which is what we created here. Basically this. I did not need to add a new input. You need basically this parameter name, and then you select that to the same float that was going into your parameter value, and that is really it. If I just quickly show you right now, I need to turn on audio for the game. It's gonna be really loud, so you might not be able to hear me. So let's have a listen. So yeah, that is basically the gist of it, and I think that's all for this tutorial. You can download, as I said, all the audio in the description. Make sure to check Charlie's tutorial. It's amazing. It makes your trees actually sway in different directions. It looks like witch's wind, which is just mental for an indie game to have that. And If you like to follow up on my games, called SunnySide. It's a JRPG farming game like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon. You can subscribe to the channel. There's a Discord server down below. If you like to chat about Unreal, or if you want to follow up on my game, I post daily on there as well. And there's a Game Jolt page if you like to check the game over there as well. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.